رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. For the love of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. And for the hastening of the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: do we need religion in the 21st century? Keep that in the back of your mind, inshallah, we'll get to it. When we come to our modern world, we as followers of the Ahlul Bayt in particular and citizens of society in general must be attuned to our society. Where do we live? What are the challenges that we face? And how do those impact us or not? Because we understand that as citizens of this world, and as in particular followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, you and I do not live in a vacuum. We live in a society. We go to school in this society. We go to work in this society. We have friends. We have neighbors. And therefore we come forward in our belief system, in Islam. We say Islam is a comprehensive, complete way of life. That it is something that gives us guidance on every aspect of life and every avenue of life. Therefore, when questions come about in our era and our time with respect to what is the utility of religion, what is the benefit of religion, why do we even need religion in our modern day and age, you and I must have answers to these questions. Because this is what the backbone of our faith rests on. If we are not confident in this, if we are not understanding this concept, you and I, how can we build from there? And the data is showing that the trend and the drift of society is going in a particular direction. Whether you and I realize it and are cognizant of it or not. Therefore, tonight I want to look at and try to give an answer to this question about what is the benefit, and if there is a benefit, what is the benefit of religion in the 21st century? Because the argument that comes forward from many in society today is that yes, religion had a benefit in the history of man. It had a benefit maybe 5,000 years ago, maybe 10,000 years ago, maybe 3,000 years ago, maybe 2,000 years ago, maybe even 1,000 years ago. But if you look at the history of man, at least in the last 500 years, if not the last 800 years, many will come forward and argue that all of the progress that has happened in society has been secular in nature. From the Magna Carta to the Declaration of Independence, all of these were secular documents. This is the argument that will come forward. Therefore, when we live in our society, even the regulations that we have on the streets, those are all secular in nature. Therefore, what's the benefit of your religion? If you and I don't have good answers to these questions, how do we move forward as Muslims and citizens of this world in the 21st century? Therefore, I want to look at what is the problem that we're actually trying to discuss and understand. Where is our modern society going? What is the data showing us with respect to how our society is evolving? What are other communities, other faith religions, Judaism, Christianity, what are they facing with respect to this question, and what's their view on this matter? What does Islam say about this topic, and how does it relate to you and I? How can we learn from the field of sociology to help get answers to this question so we can implement it in our lives? And finally, how did Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, through his stand, show us the importance of religion and faith and what our responsibility is in the modern world? This is our schedule for the night, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Before I get going, I want to continue from where we left off. Last night, you will remember that I shared a tradition with you with respect to the 10th Imam, where the Imam was asked about what is the hujjah of the time and the miracles of the prophets, where he said that each prophet was given a miracle according to their time. The Imam said that Musa alayhi salam's time was the time of magic. Therefore, Musa was given the staff which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave. Then the time progressed with the time of, for example, Nabi Isa alayhi salam, Jesus peace be upon him, that era and that time was of medicine. And therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Isa ibn Maryam the ability to bring the dead back to life. Then we got to the time of Rasulullah, where Rasulullah lived in an era and time where the Arabs prided themselves on knowledge, on especially knowledge of literature, of adab, in particular poetry and linguistics. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the miracle of the Quran. That He said, this is a linguistic miracle. This is a miracle of literature. And if you don't believe, then there's an open challenge. That bring one verse that is equivalent to the Quran and you have your solution solved. But the answer that the Imam gave after this is what I wanted to share with you. And that is my segue today. The companion asked, Yabna Rasulillah, what is the hujjah of today? That was the time of Musa. That was the time of Isa. That was the time of Rasulullah. Today is a different era. The needle of time has moved forward. What is the hujjah today? The Imam alayhi salam said, very good question. He said the hujjah of today, the miracle of today, the proof of today is aql. Reason. He said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted you and given you the gift of reason, the gift of intellect. You must use this intellect in order to deduce what is right and what is wrong, and what is truth and what is falsehood. Number one, principle number one, the hujjah of today, the miracle of today is the aql that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has developed and given you and I, and given the tools through Rasulullah for us to deduce what is right and what is wrong. Number one. Number two, what should our relationship be with knowledge? This is a very important aspect. I remember a few years ago, I went on a trip to Najaf al-Ashraf. May Allah grant us all the ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Najaf al-Ashraf, inshallah. Amir al-Mu'mineen is mazharul ajaib. He is that individual who manifests traits which are strange to the human being. He's, as the French historian said, he's an individual, Ali ibn Abi Talib, who not only was the greatest warrior of his time, he was also the greatest scholar of his time. A human being normally does not embody these contradictory traits. That either someone's an intellectual and academic, or they're a warrior. But this individual embodied seemingly contradictory traits. That I would not think, for example, that Einstein, who NPR had done a survey on, that which individual will be remembered 1,000 years from now. The number one person on the list was Einstein. But I would not expect Einstein to be the most courageous necessarily on the battlefield. He may be, he may not be. But analogously, at the same level, I would not expect the most courageous person on the battlefield to be the greatest intellectual. Yet Amir al-Mu'mineen embodied these traits. You and I are followers of Bab-e Madinatul Ilm. That is the gateway, the door of knowledge, to the city of knowledge, which the city is Rasulullah. We must embody these things. There was a very famous journal that was in Iraq. It was an academic journal that was circulated amongst the community of Iraq. On the cover of this journal were some calligraphy, and in each corner there was a hadith, a tradition from the Holy Prophet. In the middle was a verse of the Quran. Which verse? Iqra. Bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord. The first revelation. That was in the middle. In the corners of it were 4 traditions with respect to knowledge, which I would like to share with you. The editor of the journal had these actually in his office. So this was on the cover of the journal. The first tradition with respect to knowledge that was there, that talabul ilm faridatun ala kulli muslim wa muslima. That obtaining knowledge is an obligatory action among all Muslims and Muslimas, all male and females. It's not optional. It's not something that if I want to, I don't want to. It's something that's wajib, obligatory, farida. It's something that you and I must do, regardless of gender. Number 1. Number 2, it said, "Utlubul ilm min al-mahdi ila al-lahad." Obtain knowledge from the cradle to the grave, prophetic tradition. Meaning that first point, gender does not discriminate. Male or female has to obtain knowledge. Number 2, the time does not discriminate in Islam. From every moment of my birth until my death, I must be obtaining knowledge. From the childhood, it's not like, for example, I just go to get my high school degree, then I get my bachelor's, and then I get my master's and PhD, and then I stop learning. Would you imagine for a moment that if I started when in my youth and I start working out and I go to the gym and I exercise, you know, they've asked physicians in numerous surveys that if they could prescribe one pill to individuals, what would it be? They said continuously, if they could put one thing in a pill, in a silver bullet form, it would be diet and exercise, because of the benefit that it can have in your life. But imagine if only in my high school years or only in my college years, I work out, I go to the gym. After college, I don't work out. Someone asks me, do you work out? Yeah, I worked out 20 years ago. I worked out 30 years ago when I was in college. Will that benefit me still? The jury would say that perhaps not. That benefited at that time, but I must continuously be doing it. Analogously, with respect to knowledge, I must be obtaining knowledge throughout my life. And this is what Islam says. Number 1, it does not matter of the gender. Number 2, from the cradle until the grave. Furthermore, utlubul ilm walau bis-Sin. Obtain knowledge even if you have to go to China. China was a very ardent journey at that time. It was a very difficult journey. It was not easy, meaning it's not space-bound either. Time is not limited, nor is space. If I want to have a majlis, or if you want to have a majlis at your house, you have to put on the flyer or the message that you send out to the mu'mineen 2 things, space and time. Where is the location of that majlis and what's the time of it? And if you don't, then people will not know how to be there. Islam said, whether it's time, whether it's space, you must obtain knowledge because it is an obligatory action. The final tradition that was on the cover of that magazine, what from the Prophet was that you and I must obtain knowledge in the way that knowledge, ilm, is the lost property of a mu'min. Ajib. Meaning, and the tradition continues that you must obtain it from wherever you get it. Meaning that it's not just that I need to listen to, for example, a Muslim or a Shia or a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. If it is something that is of benefit and it is truth and haqq, I should adopt it because it's my lost property. You know, this entire calligraphy, this cover was on the back of the office, on the back wall of the office of the editor of the journal. There was a German professor who was visiting. He said, "Can you please explain to me what this says?" He went one by one and he explained the verse of the Quran first. Then he said that it doesn't matter on the gender, it doesn't matter the time or the space, it doesn't matter if you have to go to China, it doesn't matter. Even if it's not from a Muslim, you must obtain it. He said, "Really? I never knew Islam said that." He says, "I am shocked that Muslims are not at the forefront of modern society." Meaning you and I, we must understand what it is that our faith has required of us. When I went to Najaf, I remember we were a group of young speakers from the Muslim community in the West, from the UK and the US. We kept asking, what do you think that the mu'mineen of the West, the Shia, followers of the Ahlul Bayt, should be known for in the West? We asked the top scholars in the Hawza Ilmiya of Najaf, the ones who are teaching. And time again, the response that came from them was that you as followers of the Ahlul Bayt should be known foremost for your knowledge. And this is exactly what Sayyid Sistani said in his letter to a group of youth who asked him for some advice. They said, Sayyid Sistani, can you give us some advice? And he gave some very wonderful advice. He said, make sure, in one of the points in this entire letter, which I highly recommend, he says, make sure you study and make sure you try to specialize in a field. But he doesn't stop there. He says, do not just absorb knowledge from the books that you read, the textbooks, the literature. Also contribute. Meaning that those textbooks that you are reading in chemistry and biology and physics and all of these subjects, you should not just be absorbing, you should also be writing those textbooks so others benefit from you. Our generation must be the ones who, and the next one that follows, that raise this tradition of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Because all of the Imams, from Amirul Mu'mineen to the Imam of our time, every single person, even their enemies, they had to do taslim, they had to accept that they were the most knowledgeable people of their time. There's no doubt about this. Their enemies, when you can look at the history, whenever the second Khalifa had a problem, he would call Abul Hassan. Where's Abul Hassan? Where's Amir al-Mu'mineen? Where's Ali ibn Abi Talib? Because he didn't know the answer. He would call on Ali ibn Abi Talib. When we went further in times, whether it was the times of the Umayyads or the Abbasids, whenever the religion was on the line, they would always call the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We go to the 6th Imam's time. لَوْلَا الثَّنَتَانْ لَحَلَكُ النُّعْمَانِ. Who said that? Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa, who is the father of the Hanafi madhab, which is a predominant majority of the Ahl Sunnah community. Ahl Sunnah community is divided into Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i and Hanbali. Roughly 40 to 45% of all Muslims are Hanafis. They follow the fiqh of Abu Hanifa, who was the student of our 6th Imam, Imam Ja'far Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Where Abu Hanifa's real name was Nu'man. He says that لَوْلَا السَّنَتَانِ لَحَلَكَ النُّعْمَانِ, that if I did not have 2 years under Ja'far al-Sadiq, I would have perished. حَلَكَ النُّعْمَانِ. Furthermore, during the time of Imam Hadi, of course the time of Imam Rada alayhi salam, the time of Imam Hadi alayhi salam, all of the Imams, you will find that they were the foremost of knowledge. Why do I say this? Because we need to understand where we stand. The data is showing roughly 35% of all Americans today say that they do not identify with any religion. They have no religious affiliation. You know what's interesting? If you remember, tie this with some of my previous lectures, America is a very interesting study among sociologists. America is an economy which is developed yet religious. America is the most religious developed country in the Western Hemisphere. I'm being very careful with my words. It's the most religious developed country in the Western Hemisphere. Western Europe is much more atheistic. Western Europe is much more agnostic. Yet in America, we are facing a situation where 35% of people say they have no religious affiliation. Go to the demographic of 18-year-olds to 29-year-olds and those in their early 30s. That number jumps up to 50%. 50% of people under the age of 30 are saying they have no religious affiliation whatsoever. You and I must be cognizant and mindful of something called a drift. Allow me to explain what a drift is. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. If I go to the ocean, if we go to the ocean, if we go to a body of water where the land meets the sea, the ocean, imagine for a moment that you are in the ocean, you are floating there. That water has a current. It has a trajectory, it has a drift. It will take you in a particular way, whether you realize it or not, whether you like it or not. If you just stay in the water, you may not even realize how far you have gone away from where your original point was. This is the power of water and the power of a body of water. You and I, in society, we face a similar predicament. Each place that you and I live has a certain culture. It has a certain drift. Allow me to explain. If I go to Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley has a particular drift in the north of California. If I go to Cupertino and these places, you'll find, for example, people do a lot of startups there. A lot of technology entrepreneurship takes place there. All of these companies that you and I use in our mobile devices today, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or social media or Apple, they all come from the same place. That region has a particular culture that invites you, whether you like it or not, to do entrepreneurship and to be a startup entrepreneur, number one. Let's take the example of the Caribbean. What's the drift of the Caribbean? The drift of the Caribbean, amongst many other things, somebody may say if you go to Jamaica or the Bahamas, is to relax. Take life easy. Don't take it too hard. Relax. When I go to other parts of America, there's a certain drift. For example, if I take from Virginia to Texas, this is called the Bible Belt of America. It's relatively more religious than other parts of America. The Bible Belt of America, from Virginia to Texas, is much more religious than, for example, California. Sociologists have determined that California is relatively much more liberal, and it has much less concern for religion. And if you go to the Midwest, there's a different dynamic. Islam said that you and I must be aware of our environment. If you look at the stories of the prophets, from Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, to Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, Father Abraham, to Musa alayhi salam, to Isa alayhi salam, to Ashabul Kahf, to the Mu'min of Ali Fir'aun, to the time of all those individuals and even the Imams, you and I will find that these individuals were making a stand against a society that was going in the wrong direction. If you look at the time of Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, the Quran says for at least 950 years he was doing tabligh. And Nuh alayhi salam, Nabi Noah, he was going through such difficulty and such adversity that his own people would beat him and strike him, and they still would not listen to him. Until finally the flood had to come. This was a stand by Nabi Nuh alayhi salam through the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the mission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take a stand against society. Same during the time of Nabi Musa alayhi salam. Fir'aun had said, Ana rabbukumul a'la. I am the great God. And during that, at that moment, Musa alayhi salam took a stand. And he said, we must speak out against this. We don't accept this. And what followed was the miracle of Musa alayhi salam. During the time of Isa alayhi salam, the same thing. Society did not treat Nabi Isa alayhi salam necessarily in the best way. And our traditions have said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected Nabi Isa alayhi salam. But nonetheless, the people tried to plot. Same during the time of Rasulullah. What was the predicament of Arabia during the time of Rasulullah? You found the wealthy had become extremely arrogant. And they would not give other people in society their rights. And they were the haves and the have-nots. And that was how society was divided. Furthermore, there were slaves, there was Arabs, and there was an aristocracy amongst the Arabs. And slaves had no rights whatsoever. And again, as I mentioned last night, the world had been divided into Arab and Ajam. Rasulullah came and said a very monumentous statement and said that no Arab is better than a non-Arab, except in the form of taqwa. The only criteria within Islam was taqwa. This shaped and this shook the entire paradox and the entire equilibrium of society. The same with Ashabul Kahf. Ashabul Kahf were facing, the sleepers of the cave were facing a very dire circumstance where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them to go to sleep. Well, Allah gave them protection and sanctuary in a cave because their society had not evolved and moved forward. You and I are similarly faced with a certain circumstance. We are not amongst those individuals within our Islamic belief system who are simply allowed and told to just exist in society and be quiet. We must have an impact on society, and not only an impact, a positive impact. This is extremely important because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran al-Majid wa Furqan al-Hamid gives examples of societies, there are times where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one individual did an act, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished the whole nation. The idea is we have a responsibility. Where, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the example of the people of Thamud and Nabi Saleh. They had a she-camel. And at that point in time, وَأَقَرُوهُمْ, the Quran says that one individual hamstrung the she-camel. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished the whole people of Thamud because they did not speak out and they did not say something to stop this from happening. You and I must make sure that we exist in a society. Number one, we don't simply go with the drift if the drift is going in the wrong direction. We must make sure that we change our direction, and not only our direction, we change the direction of other people and bring people with us towards the good. This is the message of us as followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first objection that comes with respect to the issue of do we need religion in society is the question of religion has been the number one cause of violence in history. This is what people say. They say that if you look at, for example, the Crusades, Christians and Muslims fighting one another, it was in the name of religion. If you look at the Protestants and Catholics fighting one another, 30 years war, the 100 years war in the history of Europe, these people were fighting one another. That was because of religion. And if you look at Muslims and other religions, they're always Shias and Sunnis, they're always fighting amongst each other. The famous writer Karen Armstrong, the famous writer of religion, she says, every time I get into a cab, into a taxi in London or in the UK, every time I get in the car, people ask me, what do? I say that I'm a writer of religions. And when she says I'm a writer of religions, they ultimately all say that we don't believe in religion. And she says, why? And they say, I don't believe because religion has been the number one cause of violence in society. From the Crusades, through the Protestants and Catholics, it's always been war because of religion. How does one respond to this matter? And we must ask experts, such as Karen Armstrong and others, who have written on this topic. Academics, religious scholars, people who have spent their lives and dedicated their lives. How do we answer this? Is religion the number one cause of violence in society? Therefore, Europe came forward and said, we are going to throw the baby out with the bath water, as the old adage goes. That if there is some child that you are giving a shower to, the adage says, that the water, the bath water is unclean. You want to remove that. But you don't throw the child out with the bath water. What is the answer to this question? Sociologists come forward and say the answer to this question is no further than the 20th century. In the 20th century, from 1900 to 1999, when you look at the history of the 20th century, you will find that whether it was the Bolsheviks in Russia, or for example, it was communist China, millions of people died in these regimes. Was that in the name of religion? That was not in the name of religion. Furthermore, World War I, was that in the name of religion? That was a secular movement. Millions of people died. World War II, millions of people dead. Was that in the name of religion? Because if you're saying religion is the cause of violence in our world, that means that if I remove religion from the equation, there should be no more war. But society and history shows otherwise, that indeed there is war throughout times, and people use these tools to their advantage. Number one. But number two, when we come to this issue of religion, what have sociologists said with respect to this, and how can we learn from that? And how can we implement this in our lives, inshallah? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I am cognizant and mindful that this is a bit intellectually dense, and it will get so. But I am getting us to a natija at the end. Please bear with me. One may argue that the purpose of religion is to raise the consciousness of man, to help us understand that which we don't understand. When we go to the Hawza Ilmiya, for example, especially in the Hawza in Qom, many of our scholars actually study the work of the ancient Greek philosophers. For example, Socrates, Aristotle, Plato and Aristotle, Socrates, Aflatun and Arastu. In fact, believe me, certain scholars have argued that it is perhaps possible that Aristotle was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent 124,000 prophets to different nations and different places. We don't know who was who, and we don't know which society. In fact, some scholars have even come forward that there must have been certain prophets sent to China and India and all of these different civilizations. Nonetheless, Plato wrote a very interesting book called The Republic. In his Republic, Plato gave an analogy. The analogy was the allegory of the cave, a very famous analogy, in which he talks about what is it when one gets enlightened and sees the truth. It's a thought experience. Bear with me for a moment. Imagine for a moment that you are in a cave, and all that you have known in your whole life is this cave. And inside of this cave, your hands are tied to the ceiling. And all you can see is you're facing the wall, and there are some companions and people in the cave with you. All you see are shadows that are falling on the wall in front of you. The entrance of the cave is behind you. And you have spent your whole life looking at these shadows on the wall. He says, one day, imagine if your hands get loose from this. Your hands get released. When your hands get released, imagine that you turn around and you go outside of the cave. Your eyes begin to hurt because you've only seen darkness. You haven't seen light. And as you begin to see the light, you begin to leave the cave. When you begin to leave the cave, what happens? When you get outside of the cave, your companions are still inside the cave. When you get inside the cave, Aflatun, Plato says, you will see society. And when you see society, you will see that there are roads, and there are people, and there are bazaars, and there's a whole civilization out here that you never knew about. And you start walking and you see that those things that I saw on the wall that I called shadows, that's not reality. Reality is out here in this world. You see reality and then you race back to the cave. When you race back to the cave, you see your companions who are in the same state that you used to be some moments ago. When you see your companions and you talk to your companions and you begin to tell them what you saw outside, what you saw in reality, when you tell them, what will be their reaction? What will be their reaction when they see you having gone outside and then you come back and you say, there are people out there, this isn't reality, these are shadows. There are people, there's society, there's bazaars. Plato says people will think you have lost your mind. You have become mad. He said, do you know who he was talking about? Philosophers have said he did never use the name, but he was talking about his teacher, Socrates. Socrates was willing to drink hemlock, poison, because the government of the ancient Greece had said that you are corrupting our youth, because you are telling them to rise, and you are telling them to take control of society. And Socrates said, I have become enlightened. I can explain to you why I'm right, but you won't understand. I'm willing to drink poison. This is what happens because you and I have homework to do. This is the tough part. Our mimbar is a beautiful tradition of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. But I cannot rely on this to be my sole form of Islam. I must do some homework. I must spend some time to actually understand what my deen, what my religion says. I cannot confine my religion to just a few hours in a few days in a particular season of Muharram and Safar. There is no doubt about the afdaliyat and the fadila of the mimbar of Imam al-Hussein and Rasulullah, no doubt. But I cannot confine this religion to 2 months and 8 days, no ways. It is for my entire life. And when you start to read, you know what will happen? When you start to read, your mind will expand. Because if someone comes forward and says something on the mimbar, and you say, I've been listening to majalis for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, I never heard that. But when you read the books, you'll find, in fact, that is there. The analogy is exactly the same as what Plato said. You and I have to do homework. We have to understand what it is that Islam says, what society says, because Islam and our world has answers to the big questions. Why do we need religion? I will tell you exactly why we need religion in our modern day and era and time. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Sociology is the study of societies. You and I live in societies. We must know what is the fabric of society. This is a subject that gained popularity roughly 150 years ago, almost 200 years ago, in its most prominent form. Emile Durkheim was a professor at the Sorbonne in France. Emile Durkheim is a gigantic name in the area of sociology. He's one of the fathers of sociology, the studies of society. He lived in France. He came from a Jewish family, and he was an academic by profession. Durkheim, when he looked at society, he noticed certain trends in society, and he began to mark those trends. When he was at the Sorbonne, Durkheim made a very interesting analysis. In 1897, he published a book that is called Le Suicide. It's a French, he wrote it in French because he was French. It's been translated into English. He noticed something remarkable. He lived in France at the turn of the Industrial Revolution. Remember, I said our society has an impact on us, whether we recognize it or not, whether we realize it or not. That drift, that current, that tide is doing its job, whether we're cognizant of it or not. Durkheim said that he looked at France, he looked at Italy, he looked at England, and he looked at Holland at the turn of the Industrial Revolution. And he found something remarkable. Europe, Western Europe at that time was going from agricultural to industrial economies. They were moving from farming culture, from farming economy to industrial economy. But he was looking at Italy, which at that time, Italy was the most agricultural, the most farming culture. More industrial than Italy was England. More industrial than England at that time was Holland. Holland was the most developed. The Netherlands was the most developed at that time. He made a very stark realization when he crunched the numbers and he looked at the data. Bear with me very closely. Durkheim in his book Le Suicide said that as societies and as economies become more industrial, as modernization, as progress, as factories, as industrialization increases, the suicide rate increases. The suicide rate is positively correlated with industrialization. He looked at Italy, he found Italy was more agricultural. He found that England had a higher rate of suicide than Italy as the industrialization increased. And he found that Holland, as industrialization was increasing, their suicide rate was increasing. Why is this an issue? Because Durkheim said that this issue of suicide is a tip of the iceberg issue. Allow me to explain. What's the tip of the iceberg issue? What's an iceberg? You remember the Titanic? This very famous vessel that was supposed to be indestructible? You know, we sometimes think the Titanic is other people's problem. Do you know that there were at least 3 documented Shias on the Titanic? Documented. These were members of our community on the Titanic who sank with the ship. These people, when the Titanic was, before it sank, what happened? There was someone who was looking for the watch to make sure that the coast is clear. And at that final moment, they saw that there is an iceberg that is up ahead, a large piece of ice. They tried to move the ship away, but what happened? The ship struck the ice and it sank. Why is this important? Because 90% of the mass of an iceberg is below the surface. It is underwater. You and I see the tip of the iceberg. Durkheim said that suicide with respect to mental illness is the tip of the iceberg problem. You and I, we see the person who takes their life. There are millions of people under the surface suffering and you don't realize it. Because I tell you what, from Canada to the United States to Europe, in our communities, the biggest issue that we are facing today is the issue of mental illness. Anxiety, depression, all of these things are on the rise. And it's not our community only, by the way. It's every community. Why? Because Durkheim identified and said that there are certain aspects of society, in particular industrial societies, that are leaving people to become very unhappy. By the way, the OECD says that with respect to people harming themselves and taking their life, 45% of these people taking their lives are because of a chemical imbalance in the brain. We cannot deny that there is a physiological aspect of mental illness. And we need to have workshops with physicians and have seminars on these matters with professionals. We are talking about those aspects where society, what we can control. The other 55% of people who are harming themselves are because of loss of a spouse, losing a loved one, or love issues, relationship issues, financial issues, loss of respect and prestige in society. This is what we're talking about, what we can control. Durkheim said there are 5 reasons he identified why, as industrialization increases, people beginning to harm themselves increases. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Durkheim said, number 1, societies were moving from community-based to individualistic. Meaning, before, when I made a decision for my life, I looked at what it is that is in the best interest of not just myself, but what's in the best interest of my family. What's in the best interest of my community? What's in the best interest of other people around me? That's a community-based society. But he says that now decisions are being made in the interest of the individual alone. If I can get into the top university, doesn't matter father, mother, brother, sister, what they say, or uncles or aunts or family, I need to go. There are pros and cons to both sides. But he said that one of the big challenges that we are facing in an individualistic society is the issue of who gets credit. Allow me to explain. Durkheim said, when somebody makes it in an industrial economy, when someone becomes Jeff Bezos, when someone becomes Bill Gates, when someone becomes Warren Buffett, when someone becomes a multi-billionaire of society, society looks at that individual and says, this person made it because they worked hard. They did it because they had all the smarts, the brains. But Durkheim said that what if you don't make it? He says society puts you in a much crueler place. Society says you didn't make it because you didn't try. Society says you didn't make it because you weren't smart enough, you didn't try hard enough, you had all the same tools. Whereas in reality, you may not have all the same tools. There's an element of luck in the equation. As Warren Buffett, by the way, I'm not saying he's someone to aspire to, I'm just giving what society says. Because Warren Buffett said, they asked him, why are you so wealthy? He said, I cannot rule out luck. He said, I was born in America, number one. He says, number two, I had lived a very long life that other people may not have. And number three, I had a network that other people may not have. These elements are part of the equation. So number one, Durkheim said individual and community. That was one. Number two, Durkheim said excessive hope. Excessive hope was leading people to become more anxious and depressed. Why? You would think hope is a good thing. And indeed hope is. I'll explain this with something called Stockhold's paradox. Stockhold's paradox says, Stockhold was he was the longest prisoner of war in America during Vietnam. This was written in a very famous book that many of you may have read by Jim Collins, Good to Great. In this book, Jim Collins identifies and he interviews the longest prisoner of war in US history, roughly 8 years. He said, what kept you alive for 8 years? How did you persevere despite all these challenges? He said, I knew that one day I will be saved. I knew one day eventually somebody will come get me. I always had hope at the end. But Jim Collins asked him, but what led you to, who are the people who didn't make it? Who are the people who didn't survive? In 8 years, you must have saw a lot of people who didn't make it. He said, that's very easy. He said, the people who didn't make it were the over-optimists. The people who were overly optimistic. He said, what do you mean? He said, those people who said, this Christmas will be rescued. And then Christmas came and Christmas went. And they said, this Easter will be rescued. And Easter came and Easter went. And they said, this Thanksgiving will be rescued. And Thanksgiving came and Thanksgiving went. They never made it out because they fell into heavy depression. He says, the paradox says that what you should have is hope on one side, but you should be realistic about the situation you face. This is exactly, by the way, what Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam did. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam knew that he was facing a very dire circumstance, but he was realistic about what was happening. He never lost trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He had absolute trust in his Lord. To the point at his final moments he says, Ilahi qad wafayta ufu bi'ahdik. Allahu Akbar. I'm not at musibah yet, I'll get there in a moment. Imam Hussein alayhi salam says, Ilahi qad wafayta, my Lord, I have fulfilled my obligation and my covenant and my promise to you. Ufu bi'ahdik. Now you do your job. Allahu Akbar. The certainty of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in trust, but he never neglected the fact that it was a dire circumstance. Excessive hope, Durkheim said, is leading mankind to become very depressed. Number three, too much freedom. Durkheim said the third reason why people are getting very depressed and anxious. Remember, this book was written 122 years ago in 1897. It still rings true today more than ever. He said excessive freedom. Why? There's a book called The Paradox of Choice by Dr. Barry Schwartz. Dr. Barry Schwartz, in a study, he sent a few people to the grocery store. And he sent group A and group B. When he sent group A, he said, I want you to pick amongst these 4 cereals. and tell me what your choice is. This was group A. He took group B and he says, now I want you to go to the grocery store and pick amongst these 20 different cereals. Then he asked group A, you picked amongst 4. How happy are you with your choice? They all said, we're very happy with our choice. We're very happy. They picked cornflakes or whatever they picked. They were happy. Group B, he said, how happy are you with your choice between the 20 different cereals? They all said, if we had more time, we'd pick a different cereal. This isn't about cereal. Dr. Barry Short says, this is our world. We are sold a picture that in our relationships, in our life, in our work, that we have any option to do anything that we want. But when we don't make them, when we have so much to choose from, it makes us sadder. We start questioning our choices. We start questioning our decisions. We start questioning where we're going. Because Disney sells you this image that there's this perfect partner, this prince or princess for you, who's somewhere on the other side of the world and you have to go find them. And reality is showing that's not necessarily the case. You're much better off if you find your spouse and you are grateful for the traits that they have. Even if they live very close by. Furthermore, number 4, Durkheim said, what is leading people to become more anxious and depressed? He said, the weakening of the family structure. Number 4, the weakening of this family structure. How powerful can family be? In sociology and in cardiology, there's a dynamic called the Rosetto effect. The Rosetto effect was based on a community that's in Pennsylvania. In fact, I've lectured in a community that's only 45 minutes away from Rosetto, Allentown, Pennsylvania. And one of the brothers, after I mentioned this to him, he said, I've played soccer over there. And we had a very interesting discussion. What happened in Rosetto in the 1950s and 1960s? Rosetto was a community of immigrants from Italy. When they came from Italy, they had half the rate of cardiovascular disease compared to the rest of Americans. And when the cardiologists looked at this, they said, hold on a second, they have half the rate of cardiovascular disease, heart attack, cholesterol, all of these things compared to everyone else. What's going on? They said they must be very healthy. They must be very active. They must not smoke. And when they looked at the data, they all ate lard and they all smoked cigars. By the way, I don't recommend anyone do this. He said, what's going on? So they actually went into the town. When they went into the town, they began to realize that the social dynamics of that community were helping them live longer. They found that the people who were in Rosetto, they brought their culture from Italy with them to America. They had 3 generations living under one roof. Grandparents, parents, and children. Living under one roof, every single day they would go out in the backyard and they would cook together. They would have a meal together. They would have a social gathering and everyone sat together and everyone spent time together. The brother who I met in Allentown told me that he would go play soccer there. When they would play soccer, it was as if they had literally gone to Italy to play soccer. It was the families and everyone had come out. It was a jubilant environment. The social dynamics were helping people. In our world, the social fabric of family is deteriorating. And we need to understand why the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam told you and I that we must respect the family structure. Why parents must be respected. Why children must be respected by the parents. Why? Because the foundational element of a community is the family structure. If you and I as followers of the Ahlul Bayt are suffering with issues of divorce, with broken families and all of these challenges, how are we going to build a strong next generation? We need to be mindful of these matters. By the way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made divorce permissible. There are circumstances where it's allowed, but it is the most detested allowed thing in Islam. We are told that the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shakes when someone gets divorced. But there are circumstances where it may be allowed. For example, in the instance of abuse. If the male or the female, the husband or the wife are abusing, you're saying how with the wife? Somebody may say, so psychological abuse. This is a form of abuse. And of course, let alone physical abuse. Remember, a follower of Ali ibn Abi Talib would never raise a hand on a woman. It's impossible. The enemies of Ali ibn Abi Talib did this. Read the pages of history, it'll become crystal clear. We must have strong family structures. Durkheim says, number 5, the 5th reason as to why societies that are industrial are becoming more depressed and more anxious is the weakening of the religious structure. He said, religion is deteriorating in our society. He himself was at least an agnostic, if not an atheist, by the way. But he said, we need religion now more than ever because of the social structure that it provides, if nothing else. And if you don't take my word for it, why do we need religion in the modern world? Research at Harvard, London School of Economics, top institutions around the world have shown why. The question is, why should I attend? Why should I come to the Imam Bargah? Why should I come to the Husainiyah throughout the year? Research shows that people who attend one or more religious gathering every single week, at least once a week, whether church or mosque or synagogue, on average, they are happier, healthier, and wealthier than people that don't. These are benefits that you will get here in this world, let alone the akhirah. Make a time and make this institution a priority in life. Life is a game of priorities. When something's important in life, I make time for it. You know, sometimes we're facing this era of people saying, I'll watch the live stream, I'll watch the recorded lecture. Alhamdulillah, if you have certain circumstances which don't allow you to come, that's different. But if you have the opportunity, attend, because it was not just about sitting behind a screen, it was about interacting with other people. To not only do that, but also to give pursa to Bibi Fatima Zahra, to Imam Sajjad, to meet the Mu'mineen. We live in a world where our dynamics are shifting. We as followers of the Ahlul Bayt need to be mindful. And there are things that are making the challenges more difficult, such as social media, where social media sells us a dream. You know those images that you see on social media, those aren't real. The models and the likes, it leaves you to aspire to a level of beauty, for example, that's not real. Wealth, people are showing images of wealth that's not their own. Renting cars, renting places, showing you that they have all these materialistic items when they don't have it. And you are judging yourself thinking that I should have it when you don't. But you don't need to. And you know what's also exacerbating the problem? Drugs and alcohol. It's a real epidemic. It's a tremendous challenge. And with DC and other places legalizing marijuana, I will tell you, if you read the research, it's very clear. Especially in your younger ages, before the age of 25, before the age of 28, 29, this prefrontal cortex of the brain is still developing up to 25. Some say up to 28, 29. When you're a young person and you use drugs in a way that you begin to use it thinking it's harmless, this can lead to new forms of, for example, mental illness, schizophrenia and the likes. This is what the research is showing. Because some youth come forward and tell me that, oh, no one's ever died from it. No one's ever left their life, but it's ruining the psychology of the mind. Who's going to speak about these things? We as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, remember my example of the current. Don't just go where the current takes you. If the current's taking you in a good direction, that's beautiful. If the current is taking you in the wrong direction, stop and swim the other way. Swim the other way. This is exactly what Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam did. إني لم أخرج عشرا ولا بطرا ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما. I did not get up for any fitna, for any fasad. Why did Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam get up? Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he said, I got up and I was looking for one thing. طلب الإصلاح في أمتي جدي. I was looking for reformation in the ummah of my grandfather Rasulullah. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam saw that society, the halal of Muhammad had become haram and the haram of Muhammad had become halal. He said, I can no longer stay seated. I must stand. Banu Umayyah had ruined society. There's a book by Abu al-Ala Mawdudi, Khilafa wa Mulukiya. Abu al-Ala Mawdudi is not a Shia, he's a Sunni scholar. But he said after Ali ibn Abi Talib's Khilafah, he said Islam shifted and the trajectory of Islam shifted from Khilafah, from Caliphate to kingdoms, Mulikiyat. That started with Banu Umayyah. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam said, good, he said, Amar bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar is not being upheld anymore. He said, I must stand. Promoting good, forbidding evil is not being upheld anymore. I must stand. You and I must be like those people, like the way Plato had said, the one who leaves the cave comes back. We must become enlightened. How do you become enlightened? Through the teachings of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. When we establish and live and embody those teachings in our lives, you will realize we will become those people that are an ornament for the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Kunu zina lana. The Imam alayhi salam, Imam Askari says, be a zina, be an ornament for us, the Imams. That when someone sees you, a follower of the Ahlul Bayt in society, they say that this is a follower of Ali ibn Abi Talib, a good person, an excellent person. The action should state this. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam knew this. You and I must follow the seerah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in our lives. That no matter what happens, if the tide goes one way, do not be afraid to stand. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam tells us, a mu'min is an individual who fears nothing except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Part and parcel of a mu'min. Doesn't matter what I lose, no matter what price. Therefore, my next generation, I tell you, the objective and the action item is that we and I must go home and assess where do we stand. Am I following the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt or not? And if I'm not, how can I start doing it in my life? Start with one step. In the morning, at the beginning of the day, start with the hadith, a verse of the Quran. Implement it. It will change your life. The teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. When you read the letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen to Malik al-Ashtar, when you read Nahjul Balagha, over time, especially when you read this letter to Malik, you will start thinking, in a fraction of a way, you will start thinking and understanding how Amir al-Mu'mineen thought. By the way, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen in his will and his wasiyah to his son, he says, my son, study and learn from the pages of history. He says, I went and I read the pages of history up until the point it was as if I was walking amongst the ruins of past civilizations. Why? Because history repeats itself. And once you understand, there's a beautiful book called Generations, and it says every 80 or 90 years, history repeats itself. If you look at the Great Recession, 2007 to 2009, go 80 years back, you'll find the Great Depression. These Islamophobic challenges that we're facing, 2 cycles ago, 1850s, the exact same thing happened in America. With Irish Catholics, with Jews and other people. Because when you study history and you understand the cycles of history, you can start predicting what's about to happen. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam saw what is about to happen. And he knew that it was a tipping point for society. I must do something. Even if I have to give my family. Even if I have to take my women and my children to the plains of Karbala. Allahu Akbar. Ajrukum Allah. I've taken much of your time. I won't take much more. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam knew the tide and the drift of society was going in a particular direction. He said, I must stand. I must swim in the other direction. But is there who will go with me? Society found there was only a few people. Only 72 companions who said that we will go, and the family members of the Imam alayhi salam. And he gave them one after the other. But I will recite for you a few musibah after the tragedy of Karbala. Very, very short. We are told, I was sitting in the presence of Ayatollah Hafiz Bashir al-Najafi. When I was sitting there, he began to recite the musibah as a tabarruk for us. And when he began to recite this musibah, he said, do you know on the night after Ashura, on Sham-e-Ghariban, he said, do you know that was a very dark night? And in that very dark night, Sayyida Zainab was going to collect all the children of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And when she would go to collect the children of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, she would run in one direction after the cries of the children, and then she would trip on a crater in the ground and fall on her face. Agha says that she kept doing this until she fell so many times, but she finally collected all of the children of Imam al-Hussein. Ajrukum ala Allah. They say that Sayyida Zainab, that finally after Ashura, she got a little bit of water. I don't know how the water got there. When she got the water, she began to take the water and she began to pour the water out and she began to distribute it amongst the children. She took the first glass of water and she brought it to a 4-year-old daughter of Imam al-Hussein, Sakina bint al-Hussein. Ajrukum ala Allah. At that moment in time, we are told that Bibi Sakina said, my Aunt Zainab, can you please tell me, why did you give me this glass of water first? They say Bibi Zainab said, my child Sakina, you are the youngest of the children. Bibi Sakina took the water. She went into the maqtal, into the battlefield. She went in a direction. Bibi Zainab said, Sakina, where are you going? Sakina said, my Aunt Zainab, you said the youngest ones get water. My 6-month-old brother Ali Asghar, he didn't get any water. I'm going to give. Ajrukum ala Allah. Final moment, I won't take much of your time. There's another narration. Ajrukum ala Allah. There's another narration that I have heard from the ulama of Karbala, the scholars of Karbala. They say that when Sayyidah Zainab, when she gave the water, she gave it to Bibi Sakina. She gave it to Bibi Sakina, and when Bibi Sakina got it, she said, my Aunt Zainab, why did you give me this water? She said, my daughter, my child, you are the most thirsty. That's why I gave you the water. Bibi Sakina went into the maqtal. She went a different direction. Bibi Zainab said, where are you going? Sakina got to one body that did not have a head, and she said a line that breaks the heart. She said, Baba, I brought you water. Baba, you were so thirsty. I finally got water to give you. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulullah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'minin. Sallallahu alayki ya Fatimah al-Zahra, Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alamin. Sallallahu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn وعلى الصحاب الحسين معتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين
حسين حسين حسين حسين حسين حسين
جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب guarding the holy Rosa we are the Shia lions facing the evil arrows we are a wall of iron until we die we will shelter Idara Zainab labbaik barzubana janam fidaya Zainab 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 we are the sword of Haydar no army can defeat us we are the plan of Zahra no Lucifer can beat us like oxygen we breathe in Karbala Zainab labbaik barzubana janam fidaya Zainab 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 from Karbala to Kufa Kufa to Sham Bibi you brought a revolution with your kalam Bibi hear the reverberations from that Sada Rabbik. Read in the name of Allah. The indigent and hungry. Feed in the name of Allah. Knowledge and empathy are what signifies Zainab. Labbaik barzubana. Janam fidai Zainab. Janam fidai Zainab. Janam fidai Zainab. Janam fidai Zainab. Janam fidai Zainab.
Hussein, Hussein. Hussein, Hussein.
Hussein, Hussein.
Hussein, Hussein. Okay.
Asghar haye asghar 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 haye asghar ए शाहिदी के दिल पर ए रूह कल्ब मादर ए तशनकाम मुज़तर ए बेज़बान असगर ए 6 महीने वाले तुझको मेरा सलाम असगर आए गर असगर आए असगर सूखे लबों पे तूने जिस दम ज़बा फिराई सर को झुका के रोया दुश्मन का हर सिपाही ए 6 महीने वाले तुझको मेरा सलाम असगर आए असगर असगर हाय असगर शिकवा न करना असगर पानी नहीं मयसर आंसू बहा के मैंने तोरे बद को कर दिया तर ए 6 महीने वाले तुझको मेरा सलाम असगर हाय असगर असगर हाय असगर
Hussein, Hussein. Hussein, Hussein.
From the heart till we live, we will say, Ya Hussein. From the heart till we live, we will say, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Hussein, Ya Hussein. From the heart till we live, we will say, Ya Hussein. From the heart till we live,
we will say, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
We are Ansar-e Husseini, we will not leave Al-Hussein. We are Ansar-e Husseini, we will not leave Al-Hussein. Even if you burn our bodies, even if you burn our bodies, if you cut
Our every day.
from the heart till we live, we will say, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein.
Run to Kufa, Ashqiya said when they saw Zulfiqar. Run to Kufa, Ashqiya said when they saw Zulfiqar. In the hand of Ibn Hadar, in the hand of Ibn Hadar, Fatih Badr Hunain. From the heart till we live, we will say, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Mawla whispered, Inna lillah wa ilayhi raji'un. Mawla whispered, Inna lillah wa ilayhi raji'un. We are for Allah and unto, we are for Allah and unto, Him we must return again. From the heart till we live, we will say, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Oh, corrupt historian trying to hush up Karbala. Oh, corrupt historian trying to hush up Karbala. Can your pen silence the echo? Can your pen silence the echo of the shackle and the chain? From the heart till we live, we will say, Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Allahumma salli ala Hadi.